rather than look at this reading from the perspective of the old law, which is what Jesus is referring to, we look at it from that opening line, I give you a new commandment from John 13, love one another. So love is the foundation. I want to refer back to that section of Paul's reading to the Corinthians. It's kind of poetic, kind of confusing, but it's very simple if you unveil it, and that's the word that he's using, unveiling. He says to the people of Israel, and because he's talking to the people of Corinth, which is Greece, he's talking about the people of Israel, and he says, like, there's a veil over their face. They can't see God. Now, he could be referring to the veil of the great temple, okay, the veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, or he could just be talking about a metaphoric veil that prevents us from seeing God. There's something before us that prevents us from seeing God. And he carries that poetry forward with saying, when you move the veil from your face, you see God and the image of God, who is Jesus Christ. And I think that's such a beautiful analogy we have in our tradition of the Stations of the Cross. Veronica, Verus Icon, we don't know if it was authentic, but the woman who cleaned the face of Jesus with her own veil. And he left an impression on that. That's tradition. Okay, it's not biblical, but it's a tradition that goes back into the early stages of the church. So we hold on to it. There are a lot of traditions that you have in your family that are not authentic or history-based, but we carry them on, okay, because we believe that's how our ancestors believed. Now, it's not a dogma, but it's certainly a piece of the gospel. The image of God is Jesus. That's the key. You want to see God? Look at Jesus. And now we go to Jesus, and what is he? What's the image he's creating for us today? He's talking to his own disciples, and he says, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. So if you're doing the rules, that's not enough. Okay, the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees was to keep the rules, the commandments, not the 10 Commandments only, but the many, many laws of the Old Testament that they observed. There were like 730 of them. So that was a burden, and Paul often talks about the burden of the law, because there's so many, and they were so fastidious in keeping the commandments that they missed the underlying message of the commandments. And Jesus has summarized that more than once. Love one another as you love yourself. Love God as you love your brother and sister. That's the summation. So Paul refers to that often, and Jesus is saying, don't be so self-righteous that you think you did the right thing. And you know what? There are a lot of people who are Christian, who are Catholic, who think they do the right thing, but they do it in a self-righteous way, and that's hypocrisy. Now, we've got to be careful of that. If I approach another person, either in my head or in person, and I think I'm better than him or her, and I don't approve of the way he or she is carrying out the faith, and I talk about him, I gossip about him or her, then I'm being a hypocrite. So we have to look at each other as sinners, all of us, presuming we're sinners. And if we're all sinners, then no one is a bigger sinner than the other. I don't care how many or what the sin is. Nobody's a bigger sinner than the other. And no one can judge one another. And Jesus is making that very clear. The Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, they know all the rules. But boy, are they big sinners, because they don't lift a finger to help the burdens of the poor. They don't really carry out the theme of God's covenant law, which is love. So it comes back to us, and then Jesus carries on. What would happen if you are calling someone to court? And he's telling them how to settle your argument with your brother and sister before you go to court. But even for us, the Christian, before you come to the altar with your offerings. Yes, he could be talking to the Jews who would bring doves and pigeons and oxen to the altar of God for sacrifice. He's talking to us now, the Christians. Before we come to the Lord's table, we have to be reconciled with each other. That's why we begin the Lord's Mass with the penitential rite. We say, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. On me, not on you, on me. And every one of us says it for him or herself. Lord, forgive me, because I'm sure I've offended someone today in some way, because I'm not perfect, we are sinners. And if I haven't offended someone today, well then, I ask for forgiveness for the times I have offended someone. And gossip, I hate it. Gossip is the worst offense. Hypocrisy and gossip are the same anchor that'll drag us into hell. And we who are Christians have to be very authentically conscious of not being hypocrites. Jesus in the gospel earlier this week said, yes is yes, no, St. Paul said, yes is yes, no is no when you come into Jesus. You have to be authentic. That's very important. So the scriptures today, there are many people who are not Christian who hear our word and probably say, well, that's great. Too bad the church doesn't live out that word. And you know what? Regrettably, very often, they're right. Because we are heavily responsible for the word of God. More responsible than the pagan, the person who's an outsider, the person who doesn't know Christ. We are very responsible. But that should be a joy. Hey, to be responsible, to walk in the shadow of Jesus Christ, to be assured that our brother Jesus is always with us, encouraging us, pushing us along to be better. As he says in his own words, your righteousness must surpass that of the phonies, of the hypocrites. Otherwise, you're not going to come to heaven. So let's keep it going. Let's improve each day, presuming we're each sinners, loving and forgiving one another. And goes back to the old adage I learned in grammar school, you hate the sin, but you love the sinner.